the Italian Football Podcast.
So before we discuss Juventus versus Bologna, which was a thrilling match, just a little discussion on Max Allegri, because he was sacked on Friday while Nima was on his way to Milan. So Nima hasn't had his chance to have his say on this. I did do, though, a short snap reaction on my phone on Friday evening. Where I gave some just some initial thoughts really to this. But I mean, it's moved on since then now. But I mean, at the time, I think there were two big talking points. I just want to get your viewpoint on that. Number one was the way that it was handled by Juventus. Even the most Allegri out of people ranged from saying this wasn't the way to do things to it should have been done in a different way. So I want to get your, first of all, what's your viewpoint on that? And secondly, where do you see this going from now? It's going to get really ugly, isn't it, Nima?
It's going to get very ugly because, like I said last week, on Thursday after the Coppa Italia final, I said, look, you have to remember that Max Allegri is Andrea Agnelli's one of his best friends. They're very close. They, the legendary, morning runs and breakfasts they had for all the years that Agnelli was in charge of Juve. We know that there is hardly any love lost between the Elkan wing and the Agnelli wing of the family. So it's he doesn't really risk anything because his loyalty lies with Andrea Agnelli. So there's that aspect of it as well. But it would be ridiculous and incredibly disingenuous to sit here and pretend that this was not this was well handled by Juve, and the way that Giuntoli decides to take, one of the first major decisions that he decides to take is to go to war with Max Allegri. We're talking about someone who has won 5 Scudetti, 5 Coppa Italia, 3 Supercoppa, 2 Champions League finals. That makes Allegri by definition a Juventus legendary coach. And that he decides to go like this and starts talking about certain behaviors in that ridiculous statement. Certain behaviors are not acceptable. It's just, on the one hand, it is very typical Juve, because at Juve, if they kick out Alessandro Del Piero, they can unceremoniously kick out Max Allegri. At Juve is the most important thing, and by that, it's this kind of il padrone c'è, this thing where I always talk about.
I think
how in Italy, psychologically, Italy is still a feudal country. It's still a feudalistic country. And that is something that we saw an example of again, but at the same time, it's very, very, it should never have come to this. It should never have become this infected. And the fact that it became this infected, that it became this toxic, is also on Juve. They are a club that usually doesn't allow for these things to happen. These things happen elsewhere, but not at Juve. But it did happen, and the fact that it did happen and that he exploded the way that he did, that it was at the same time, it's Allegri. You have to respect him, and he was not respected. This was someone who was constantly for 3 years unprotected at Juve, which is very, very unlikely, which is very, very not typical of Juve. They're very good at controlling the narrative. And the fact that, again, the Tuttosport director, the head boss at Tuttosport, which is essentially Juve's paper, fanzine, came out and on the record and said all these things that he did, he would never have done that if Juve had not given the green light. And the fact that they gave the green light speaks volumes. And I think it was incredibly unworthy of Allegri and his tenure at Juve. I think Juve kind of crossed a line here. This Juve crossed a line here that I don't think can be unwashed, or it's a spot that will not out. And I think for as long as the Elkan and Giuntoli era persists, this is something that will come back to hurt them politically, definitely, because Allegri is extremely well liked in Italian football. He has very, very many, very, very powerful friends, not just in the media, but in Italian football. And this was not how they wanted it to end. What they wanted was for him to parade around in the last home game at the Juve Stadium and say his goodbye to the fans. They wanted a worthy exit. They did not want this.
Yeah, I agree with quite a lot of that. I think it was very cold the way that they did it, and to deny him a kind of a goodbye as well, I think is bad. The only thing I can think of is maybe after everything that happened on the after the Coppa Italia final, forget the stuff with the Tuttosport director. I don't think that really played much into it, to be honest with you. I think what Juventus didn't like was, and we've had it confirmed now, that he went against Giuntoli on the pitch, told him to go away. That's been confirmed now. So there's clearly, we know that relationship was there was no relationship by the end, and that they don't like each other. Whether they saw that there was going to be more of this in the last 2 weeks of the season, and it was just going to
that was not going to happen,
and it was going to become a circus.
No, that was not going to happen. That was a burst spur of the moment thing by him and Hugh, because it was raw human emotion. There was nothing planned about that. That was completely him just being overwhelmed by that and basically, saying, damn you all. But
if that's the case, then I think it's cold. But we don't know that.
But look, you can't do that at Juve. At the same time, you can't do that at Juve.
I'm not condoning what he did. Obviously, what he did. I don't think anyone's condoning what he did. No. That was wrong. But but that does happen.
But for me, But for me, the thing I look at it is, I think the mistake happened earlier. I go to the root of the issue, and the root of the issue is that ever since Giuntoli took over, he's been alone. Allegri. He's not been protected. You can't really blame anyone.
I don't know if I disagree with that.
After the previous. I
don't know if I agree with that, because publicly.
Let me just finish. I'm not talking about publicly. I'm talking about how Juve operates. Juve operates like the mafia. They protect everyone who works at Juve, whether they like them or not. That's just how Juve has always worked. But since Giuntoli took over, I'm not talking about the interim period before when the previous board resigned in disgrace after a SWAT team burst in. No, because that was unheard of. I'm talking about from the minute that Giuntoli came in, the way it was evident that Giuntoli was going to get rid of Allegri. He was a dead man walking. Throughout all of this, all the rumors about him extending Allegri was nonsense, and I said so on the spot at the time. There's no chance of that happening, and that in it of itself is not how it works at Juve. When you work there as the head coach, from the minute you're there to the very end, you are protected. And he wasn't.
I disagree about the protection thing completely.
He was not protected by the club.
I disagree with that. I think if you look at the media, he was very protected, very protected. Even by Tuttosport, the criticism against Allegri in the Italian media was virtually non-existent, considering Juventus have set negative record after negative record.
No, there was. It was not non-existent. It was very.
It wasn't. I'm sorry. I completely disagree with that. Even Tuttosport a little bit, but I'm sorry. It was, until recently, where it's become impossible not to criticise Allegri because of the results. For most of these 3 years, and even since Giuntoli come, he's been so protected, and that's something that's been alluded to. I hate to use Antonio Cassano as an example. That's one of the only things Cassano's ever said. You said yourself, Allegri has lots of friends within the media.
He has lots of friends in the media. He doesn't get criticised.
Even the press conferences with journalists, he never ever has been asked the questions that he should have been asked during these 3 years about the most basic of things, like why do you not create any chances? Why is the attack so bad? Why did players something? He never gets asked these questions. He's been very protected in the media.
I know. Publicly, there are different. There are different ways.
Let me finish. Publicly, Giuntoli has always defended What happens behind closed doors is another matter. Yes, I'm
That's
sure.
not. That's
I'm
what.
sure
Yeah,
behind
that's
closed
just not.
doors. Behind closed doors, he's obviously not
That's
been
just
given.
not true, Carlo,
not-
though, because I've seen how Italian media have covered you. Where there's different
No.
ways of going. You can do fare polemica to his face and throw shit at him. But I have watched how Ravanelli, how Del Piero, how all of these Juve icons have sat in Sport Mediaset and Sky Sport ever since Giuntoli took over and have ripped shred by shred Juventus under Allegri for how they play in the pitch. That would never happen if he was protected by the club. It would never exist in a million years that Juventus icons would go out on TV and talk about how abysmal
I don't
are.
think Ravanelli and Del Piero have ever.
I have watched them
Seen
week after week after week talk about how poor Juve play, how poor they are. That's not an opinion. That is an empirical fact. There are different ways that you can criticize people.
Of course you can. Of course they're going to say that they're not playing well because you
No,
can't
not playing
say you
well.
can't
Not
say
playing
that.
well.
But
Not
actually
playing well.
ripping Allegri to shreds. That
not
hasn't happened.
Allegri. Again, listen to what I'm saying, the nuances in what I'm saying. In Italy, things sometimes, how you say and what you say, but also what you do not say is just as important. They never criticized him by name. They never went against him when he was there doing interviews. But what they did do was rip Juventus, how they played under Allegri, especially since Giuntoli took over, limb by limb. Okay? That to me is very extraordinary, and that is what has pissed him off, because that would never have happened if in a normal situation at Juve. It would never have happened. It would never have happened.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I disagree with that. I don't think that's
the football politics of Italian football dictate, especially at a club like
I don't
Juve,
think that happened.
Happen.
I don't think that happened at all.
I know it happened.
I don't think it happened at all, and I think it's the other way round. But what I agree with is I think he feels within the club that they haven't been open and honest with him, and that's what's come out in the last few days as well. That he feels that they weren't open. They've been saying, in fact, that's actually said that they've said publicly that they backed him, like Giuntoli, what he said back. He's our coach, blah blah blah. Giuntoli even said a few months ago they were planning for the future with him publicly, but privately he's been given no assurances over his future. But that's just natural. I mean, of course it's natural. I mean, it's obvious. It's obvious. It's obvious from the day Giuntoli took over that these two people are completely different people. Giuntoli and Allegri work in completely different ways. We've seen that.
That's fair enough.
Their visions of football are different. So I mean, that's to be expected. And this is what happens whenever a club wants to go in a different direction. There's nothing unusual with that.
No. But this what's unusual again. If you do not have at Juve that kind of thing where throughout historically you have them maybe criticized for one game, you have them criticized of today was not, they had a difficult game, but you do not have former club legends at that club come out and say that Juve are played incredibly poor, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, and then when Allegri comes on they don't ask him about it. Like, this is so demonstratively where they are showing respect to the club, but they are not, but they are making their points to him. He was not critically attacked by, that's not what I'm saying. Listen again to the nuance that I'm making. I'm saying the way that Juve are criticized is different to the way that the other clubs are. And when you, historically in Italy, and when you have club icons at these big TV stations talk about Juve the way that they have since Giuntoli took over, when the results have been bad, that has never happened before. Not in this way. And the fact that is part of the things that he's pissed off about, that he feels he's not been protected at Juve. That's not how it works. And that he is 100% right in. Now, the way that he handled that post Coppa Italia, where he threatened to rip off people's ears and punch them in the face and you effing a-hole, you go away. And that's not how you handle it. But the frustration was there, and it was built up through this entire year since Giuntoli took over, because Giuntoli made it absolutely clear from day one he was not going to continue with Allegri. He was not going to protect him. And I said so at the time, that I don't care what they talk about planning with the future. I don't care what he says publicly. I don't believe that he will continue past this season. And I think it was obvious. And that's what happened. And that, to me, is where the mistake or the abnormal behavior.
I think what Juventus have done wrong is they should have just let him see out the season, and they should have given him the chance to at least parade the trophy and say goodbye to the ultras, for example, who absolutely worship his feet. Not that the ultras deserve anything, because I despise them. But at least give him the chance to go out with some dignity, whatever you think of him. And that's coming from
But it's
him.
not him going out with dignity. It's a little bit like, it's also the optics of it. Like, he would end the season on a positive note.
Yes, everything. I agree with you. That is where I think that Juventus, and I think you said that Allegri acted hastily. I think maybe Juventus acted hastily as well. Why do they have to act so soon? Like, it was already clear. I knew by Thursday
They had
morning.
to do that.
I knew by Thursday morning
Their hands were forced. Yeah, but their hands were forced. I mean, when he publicly, the way that he goes against the club directors and that way that he did and told people that,
and that's what I think was the key thing. That's what I don't think it was. I don't think it was the Tuttosport. I don't think it was the Tuttosport thing. I think it was the directors. It was going.
No, I don't think it was the Tuttosport thing, and I didn't say that it was the Tuttosport thing. I used that as an example of showing that the fact that it was leaked was because Juventus wanted it to be leaked. If Juventus did not want it to be leaked, nobody would have found out about it. Not in the way that the actual director goes out and writes it and says it publicly. This happened. He told me this.
I haven't said that though. I have to give the other side is while and I've said it, while I think Juventus should have done this differently and he should have been able to finish the season. I do also think that Allegri he can't complain too much because, as I said on my post-match pod, he's very, very lucky to have still been Juventus coach now. If it was any other coach, he would have been sacked long ago, And so for him to get to this stage and then feel bitter about not getting another season or bitter for getting sacked, yes. The way that it happened was wrong. Was it should have been done in a different way. But he's lucky to have got here.